For all your pastry, bakery, and quality food, CK Restaurant is the only place to be. We do catering for birthdays, weddings, and all related services. We have all kinds of local foods, American, European, and even beyond. Come and have a taste of our local juice, ebe, and other services. At CK Restaurant, customer satisfaction is our priority.
Are you thinking of owning your dream homes? EJ Investment is here for you. Secure our quality bungalows with 2, 3, or 4 bedrooms, or our story buildings, 3 or 4 to 5 bedrooms at very affordable prices with flexible payment plans at our Sanyang Seaview Estate, where you can enjoy the cool breeze with modern infrastructure such as tar roads, covered drainage system, modern electrification with street lights, gated entrance with security posts, and social amenities such as gas station, shopping mall, medical clinic, park, schools, children daycare, and a lot more. Our dedicated team of professionals will keep the estate clean at all times, provide security and patrol team within the estate premises, install latest technologies such as CCTV, Wi-Fi, home network installation, solar panel, and power backup system. Also, check out for our additional home facilities and interior design service such as premium tiling, wall plaster, home landscape, fingerprint home lock, and a lot more. Visit our office at Senegambia Kololi Highway and get a free site visit tour, or contact us on 4464838. WhatsApp us on 3259220. Or you can visit our Facebook page or Instagram on EJ Investments. EJ Investments, we are first in properties.
Islamic microfinance is becoming an increasingly popular mechanism for poverty alleviation, especially for developing countries around the world. This microfinance service adheres to the principles of Islam as a form of social responsibility. Yona Islamic Microfinance is the Islamic microfinance of choice in the Gambia, trustworthy and reliable. At Yona Islamic Microfinance, we provide savings products, current accounts, financing products in conformity with Islam. In addition, Yona Islamic Microfinance also offers local and international remittances, takaful fund, management of zakat, management of awqaf, trading and investment, and building of strategic partnerships to bring financial services to the doorstep of the poor with donor projects, madrasas, youth organizations, women groups, and farmer organizations. Make a choice with Yona Islamic Microfinance today. For more information on Yona Islamic Microfinance, call 377-2151 or 9832-151, or visit Yona head office at Tipa Garage, Bakote, or visit any Yona branch located countrywide near you.
Disappearances in September 2018, so which means we've been a party to that important UN treaty going back 3 years ago. The treaty has a monitoring body, as in the body that makes sure, rights under the treaty are respected by all states that have ratified it. And The body is the Working Group on Enforced and Involuntary Disappearances. The working group is allowed to, receive reports from states on steps they've taken to make sure the treaty is actually enforced at the local level. So there is a working group, and the working group is headed by Mr. Luciano Hazan, like I said earlier on. So we have a message of goodwill from Mr. Hazan, and we're going to start by showing you that message. It's quite an important body with jurisdiction over the Gambia, because like I said, we have been party to the treaty going back 3 years ago. Louis, if the control room is ready, we would start with the video from Hassan. Thank you.
Good morning to all. I am delighted to address on behalf of the Working Group on Enforced or Voluntary Disappearances this important meeting from truth to justice, the implementation of the TRRC's recommendations on prosecutions, which focuses on the issue of accountability for human rights violations and abuses in the Gambia from 1994 to 2017 in the context of the TRRC's upcoming report and recommendations. The Working Group visited the Gambia in June 2017. At the time, it noticed that there was a good momentum for shedding light on past human rights violations, including for disappearances, stressing at the same time that more concrete steps had to be taken to guarantee the right to truth, justice, and reparation for victims for disappearance in the country. The recommendations formulated in the report, including the need to guarantee that criminal investigations of enforced disappearances are conducted and that prosecutions of identified suspects are carried out by a specialized and appropriately trained team of investigators, prosecutors, and forensic experts, as well as that the authorities in charge of the investigation have the jurisdictional, logistic, and scientific resources necessary to collect and process evidence. Last September, few years after the visit, the Working Group produced and presented to the Human Rights Council a follow-up report to the recommendations based upon its visit to the Gambia in 2017 in order to assess their level of implementation based on the inputs received from government, civil society, and other stakeholders. We found that while the Gambia had taken positive steps to move forward with the truth process, crucial actions to guarantee access to justice, remedy, and reparation for victims are yet to materialize. The Working Group reiterated its recommendations to conduct effective search activities as well as criminal investigations into grave human rights violations, including cases of enforced disappearances, and provide support and reparation to relatives. We further called on the government of the Gambia to strengthen the capacity of rule of law and justice institutions towards greater accountability for human rights violations, emphasizing that truth and justice must be pursued simultaneously and without further delays. The reform of the judiciary, which is currently underway, is encouraging in this sense and should lead towards the full independence and effectiveness of judicial bodies, which may also contribute to a more meaningful follow-up of the final report of the TRRC and on other allegations of human rights violations. The Working Group supports recommendations made by civil society to set up specialized hybrid national and international courts with specialized judges to process the cases referred for prosecution to the Ministry of Justice by the TRRC. An important step towards accountability, given that the current provisions of the criminal code are insufficient to address the distinctiveness and complexity of the crime of enforced disappearances, would be to criminalize enforced disappearance without any further delay and in compliance with the provisions of the International Convention for the Protection of all persons from enforced disappearance. This is urgent in light of the transitional justice process underway. The criminalization of enforced disappearance must also embody the continuous nature of the crime to which amnesties or immunities cannot be applied. This will allow victims to have access to justice, included but not limited to the context of the TRRC report and foreseen ensuing prosecutions. The Working Group stands ready to assist the Gambian government in its effort to prevent and combat enforced disappearance, as well as in implementing the recommendations contained in the report. I hope that these remarks can contribute to the discussion, and I wish you a fruitful and successful meeting. Many thanks.
International friends, it gives me a great pleasure to address this conference on the implementation of the recommendation of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission. Gambia's TRRC has been a model in the field of transitional justice. Over 2 years of publicly televised sessions, the TRRC heard from 392 witnesses, including victims and perpetrators. The witnesses tied the former president and his accomplices to the killing and torture of political opponents, the murder of over 50 West African migrants, and abusive witch hunts. Witnesses testified that the former president raped and sexually assaulted women brought to him and personally ran a shame treatment program that forced HIV-positive Gambians to give up their medicines. One of the TRRC tasks is the identification and recommendation for prosecution of persons who bear the greatest responsibility for human rights violations and abuses. At the end of the TRRC hearings, the lead counsel concluded that justice must happen for these crimes. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Mr. Kerr, whom I serve as special advisor, publicly stated that he agreed with the conclusion of the lead counsel. The legal responsibility for prosecuting these crimes rests in the first instance with the government of the Gambia. We hope and we expect that the Gambia will be able effectively to prosecute these crimes, either alone or with the support of regional or international partners. If the Gambia is unwilling or unable to prosecute these serious crimes, however, the International Criminal Court, in conformity with the principle of complementarity, may do its part in investigating and prosecuting those most responsible. It is also possible that many of these crimes, in particular the murder of West African migrants from Ghana, Nigeria, and elsewhere, could be prosecuted by other states under principles such as universal jurisdiction. Let us be clear, however, whether it is in the Gambia, in another African country, before the special court, or at the ICC, justice must happen, and justice will happen. Impunity is not an option. I thank you.
Thank you. I think that really was powerful coming from the advisor to the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, in The Hague. Thank you. So we have 2 more sessions. Remember, all the speakers, from the first to, even those who's just sent us messages, made it clear, whatever accountability mechanism we come up with, ICC, hybrid, a special court, our local courts, we always have to have victims, not just at the center, but at the forefront. So we really wouldn't be doing justice to, today's meeting if we just allow experts to, tell us what they think and then we disperse. I think it's important we hear from the victims because, like I said, like everybody who spoke earlier said, they should be at the very, very center of all that we do. We did in the past, we intend to do going forward. So we have the pleasure of having on our high table today 2 victims who have been pushing for justice, accountability. We have Ms. Aisha Jame, the miss is about to change, and of course Ms. Sirandao. Yes, she's, yeah, I'm Uncle Gay, so I can, yeah. So please let me invite Mrs. Jame, the program officer at the Gambia Center for Victims of Human Rights Violations, to really share her thoughts with us. Aisha, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. So, good afternoon to all the participants here today. I'm saying good afternoon to the dignitaries that are here. I'm so sorry, I do really bad in, like Auntie Nene had said before, to follow, protocols to say, to greet basically. So, I'll say good afternoon to everyone here, and good afternoon to the victims and their families and the media and to the people on the high table. So I haven't prepared any formal speech, but then I'll just talk based on my experience as a victim and also talk more on the victim perspective of what justice really means to me as a victim and maybe to other victims that are also affected by the rights violations that occurred in the Gambia. So as the video that was played here today, which I made mention a little bit about my story, my dad was killed together with my aunt. My dad happened to be Haruna Jame, and my aunt was Masi Jame, who were summarily executed by the junglers. As we heard from the testimonies from the TRC that Jame gave orders to the executions. So so mainly for me, justice really means that to see people who bear the highest responsibilities of the crimes to be prosecuted. It's not just about reparations to be paid to victims, because what can that reparation do? It cannot bring your loved one back. It's just money that is given to you, and then at the end of the day, you're just gonna use it, and then it's done. But for me, it really means having to see people who committed these crimes be prosecuted. We talk about rule of law in the Gambia all the time. We'll be hearing in speeches of our leaders talking about rule of law. And for me, if we really mean the rule of law that we always say in our conversations, I think we really need to make sure the prosecutions are attainable when the TRC's recommendations are out, to ensure that when the TRC recommends that people who bear the highest responsibilities to be prosecuted, I think any sitting government should make sure that these things happen. Because for us to attain the never again in the Gambia, for us to make sure these things that happened in the Gambia for the past 22 years wouldn't repeat themselves, we need to make sure that these recommendations are implemented, especially the side of prosecutions, because we cannot have people violate rights of Gambians, and not just Gambians, but even West African citizens, just to be free in our society, and then we are living with them. And I agree with the Honorable from Liberia, who made mention of the fact that victims are always asked to forgive and forget and move on. I get this myself all the time, especially people who might, sometimes I always say, he who knows it feels it. Sometimes people will come to me and tell me, can't you just let go and move on? You have better things to think about. I like to tell these people that I wish you really know you are in our shoes as victims. I wish you really know you feel the pain that we're feeling with our families. I wish you know the trauma that we go through every day, thinking about everything that had happened. You will get to understand really how important justice means to us, because it's not just about even just by sharing our stories, it's difficult for us. But we just want you to understand that we're going through a lot. we're going through a lot with our families when it comes to what happened to us. So it's really difficult for us to just let it go. At some point, you are like, okay, I can just move on, but come to think of it, you can't, because it's really difficult for you to understand what really we're going through. And I think I'll just stop there. I'm beginning to be emotional. Yes, so that's just for me. I think it's important that the TRS's recommendations, once they are out, and prosecutions, we need to really, as a country, make sure prosecution is key, because at the end of the day, if we really believe in the never again slogan of the TRC, we should make sure that prosecutions is number one, and we should make sure people who committed these crimes are prosecuted. And then for me, there's rule of law in the Gambia. If not, there's no rule of law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisha, for sharing not only your story, your personal story, but your thoughts as to the kind of accountability mechanism we should have in the country. I mean, always very strong, so keep it up. Uncle is proud of you. The next presenter, or the next speaker is Ms. Sira Ndao. Sira is the country coordinator for the African Network Against
Thank you very much. Yes, it is the longest CSO name I counted. So yesterday I was at the expert meeting, and today I learned a lot. And one of the first things I learned from the legal speak is that I stand on existing protocol. So I'm not going to go through the listing. I'm just going to adopt that. I was telling Nena yesterday that I think that I'm almost a lawyer now from my session yesterday. I have honestly never taken so much notes at a session. Usually I go home with my notebook empty, and I have a lot. I think I should open a stationery store, because I have a lot of these things. But here I am with over 7 pages of notes, and really that's how beneficial I think it has been for me. And this is, as a victim and somebody also working, it's very important that we understand this aspect of what is going to happen. Before I start on what I put together, I had picked up on some of the things that the speakers have been talking about, and I just wanted to start on that. And the first thing is what Aisha said about getting justice. Getting justice for us will not mean the end. It's just another step, and we still have to go on with our lives and heal. So I remember somebody when we went to Buyam at the radio station calling and saying that, victims have been reparated. It's over now, isn't it? It's never over for the victim. It will never be over. Gay mentioned something about experts coming together and bringing victims along. I always like to highlight that victims are experts too. We are the experts in our pain. And we also have skills that we can bring to the table. And going on to our brother from Liberia, he talked about how Liberia was the beginning of things. And I would like to highlight always that Liberia also had an impact on what happened in Gambia. My uncle, when he disappeared with Mahawa Cham, Sondao, 2 of the people that were involved in that case that lured them to Senegal were former rebels from Liberia, what we were given amnesty. So it is, when we talk about accountability and ending impunity, it's not just about Gambia. It's about the sub-region. It's about our neighbors. We need to protect our neighbors. So that's why we need to do something about this. Political will. Yesterday, I also learned a new term at the experts meeting, which is political demand. And I want to say that we have political demand. When I say we, I mean us, the Gambians. We can demand it. We just have to want it bad enough. We can demand it. We are the power. Fatou talked about fairness, being having to be fair. We have to be realistic. as well, that in Gambia it's going to be very difficult. Looking around the room, sitting here, I have close and long-term relationship with a lot of people in this room. Now put me in front of them and ask me to judge them. Doesn't matter, we're all human beings at the end of the day. We cannot forget the human element. So we need to be realistic as well and make sure that the people that we are putting out there to handle the process are credible people that care, right? And not only that, humans are not infallible. We also have to make sure we have the systems that will have the checks and balances to make sure that when we err, which is human, the system is there to correct us. So those are very important things that we need to also take into consideration. Talking about the benefits of the hybrid system, yesterday, discussing it, I'm almost sold. As a victim of enforced disappearances, the laws in the country right now does not have enforced disappearances. So which means that if our case was to go to court today, nobody could be charged with that. And that is, a crime against, a human rights violation. It's not just a regular crime. The best they could be charged with is, we have laws that would, but it's not enough. And also, Gay mentioned the fact that we acceded to the treaty in 2018. These things happened in 2013. So where are we going to be as a victim of enforced disappearances? And one of the things that I want to also just highlight as we talk about the hybrid process, and I really like the idea that we can right size it for us. I like that idea. We can write it to how we want it. But we also have to be taking into account that the process of the judicial system is long. It is going to take time, and things change over time. So we need to be as flexible as possible when we are putting these things together to make sure that it only doesn't serve us now when we are starting, when there's a lot of momentum, there's a lot of things, but as time goes, whatever we put together is able to stand that time that we're going to. We've had the case of Liberia, we've had the case of Sierra Leone, South Africa. Transitional justice processes are not about years or even decades. It can take a long. Some of us may not be here by the time. I recall a couple of victims that we've been working with. Sankung Balajo passed away in April. By June, Sankung Balajo was a victim of the witch hunt. By June, passed away, I think about 3 months ago as well. And his son was killed in the April 10th. They died without seeing justice, and it's going to continue to happen. So we need to take into account those things. So let me go back to my what I put together. I'll try to be as brief as possible. And I want to start with this, the length of the process that we really have to be mindful of. Yesterday or on Monday, I sent a code to Louise, to be put into press release. And I just want to highlight a few things that I wanted to, from that speech. And what I said was that the Gambia government's unfortunate, unfair, and selective decision to wait for the TRRC recommendation before considering prosecutions has cost us some valuable time. Whether we like it or not, we have lost some time. But we are here. Some victim has passed away, like I said, but we are here and now, right? We cannot change what the act said that what the decision that was made by the government. So really, all actors, national, international, must do everything in their powers now to ensure that justice is not further delayed for the victims and their families. Imagine the victims of 1994. Abdul Aziz Barrow comes to mind. He was 11 months when his father was killed. They're still waiting for justice. He has a son now. We have to manage expectations for the victims and for the country. The length of time it's going to take, nobody knows. So people really need to be aware that when we go to court now, it is not going to be that tomorrow there's a judgment, there's adjournments, there is going to be appeals. So those things need to be understood. For most of us around here, and some for myself, it's not a problem, but we have so many victims that have never heard of these things before. So we need to make sure that at the grassroots level they understand. And then also we have to help them manage their emotions. As you can see here from Aisha and I speaking, it is never easy going through the process. It is always re-traumatizing, bring up emotions. So they need the coping skills and coping mechanisms to handle it. We have heard from Auntie Adelaide some incidences of victims that, lost their mind, so to speak, because they couldn't handle the trauma at that moment. It can happen to any one of us. Trauma is real. And I want to come to our context in the Gambia that we have to be mindful of. Yes, we talk about international, we talk about all this thing, but every country, there is no one size fits all. So we have to talk about one of our context, and one of the things I already highlighted is the fact that Gambia is so small, we are all related, and connected in one way or the other. So really, we have to make sure that that does not affect the process. We have seen this happening a lot, especially in SGBV cases, where a rape case is taken to court, and then the family members goes and withdraws it because they find out that the perpetrator is related, and here and there, and and it is brought back because it has the potential of damaging families and damaging communities. So we have to be, mindful of how we manage those relationships. It is important that we don't that we don't lose sight of that connectivity. It is important that we educate the public. We have been said over and over again, and I am reiterating it because it is so important, that victims are made to understand that you can forgive, but the state has a responsibility to prosecute. They're not doing it because, they will not stop because you just forgive. So some people might be wondering, I have forgiven, why are they taking them to court? You don't have a say in it. The state has to take a responsibility. It is legally obligated within the Constitution and international treaties that they have signed. And there's this misconception, and misconception between forgiveness and accountability. That if you forgive, there's no need for accountability. So we really need to address that. Yesterday, Ida person was speaking, and she brought up some numbers about the survey that they did. About 30-something% of people, talked about forgiveness in the survey that they did. A lot of people, we have heard that in the TRRC. I recall a few victims saying that, if the perpetrator comes to me and confesses, I can forgive. Your forgiving does not affect, it should not affect the process. And for many reasons, because you've said it here, the state has a responsibility to make sure that these crimes are dealt with. And like I mentioned earlier, it's not just about, accountability is not just us holding our, the perpetrators accountable. It's not just about Gambia or Gambians, right? We have the victims from where other West African, the other 7 West African, countries. We have the potential effect of perpetrators that are emboldened and get away with this, going somewhere else where there's vulnerability and taking up arms. Some people, their skills are for sale, right? So, and we already have a fragile sub-region. We have the rebels in Casamas. We have all of these things going on. So we really need to make sure that, this is done, and it's not just about us, about Gambia. Victim participation, and I want to qualify that and say diverse victim participation. You shouldn't be seeing the same faces all the time. We need to bring other victims, because it looks like there is just a handful of victims. Sometimes, after some time and you're advocating, you have these politicians trying to label you as troublemaker. These activists, they are troublemakers. But, these people are real people that have real lives. So really, victim participation cannot be overemphasized. And yesterday at the expert meeting, one of the things that I learned is also that our system is challenged when it comes to victim participation in the process of prosecution. That whatever system we adopt has to address that. Victim cannot just go and sit and be onlookers in their case. As they say, if it's about me and I am not there, then it doesn't matter, right? If you're talking about me, you're trying to help me fix and I am not there, I cannot participate, I'm mute. It doesn't matter. So whatever system we adopt has to take that into consideration. Meaningful consultation. And it's not just consultation at the last end, bringing people and just informing them, but from the planning stage, where the victims come in and they have their input. At any stage, not just at the implementation stage or at the reporting stage where you say, come now, we have this information for you. the consultation is also part of the healing process for victims. Just being involved in the process, knowing that something is being done, is a part of the healing process. Access to information and accessibility of information has to be very important. I recall a workshop that we did on forensic investigation, and it turned out that the victims whose family members were exhumed in Yundum in 2018, after that exhumation process, they never heard from the TRC until the workshop that we held earlier this year. They were never updated. They had no clue what was going on, except rumors and hearsay. And we know how dangerous those things can be. So there was no place where they could go and ask people for information. Accessibility of information. You can have all the information in the world, everything. If you put it in a library at the Supreme Court in Banjul, in digital form, it's not accessible. So we also, the channels and the accessibility is very important of the information, and continuous engagement. Sometimes just checking in on the families helps. Have case workers that will check on them from time to time. How are you doing? I haven't seen you, I haven't heard you. How is the family? How are you coping? Just checking in the families, with the families' help. And then also ensure that victims have the capacity to participate, right? We have a lot of victims, but some of them don't have the capacity to participate. They don't understand some of the legal speak that are there. So for example, one of the examples I noted is frequently, when the TRC Act says that the people that bear the greatest responsibility will be prosecuted. What does that mean to the victim, out there? In Kilmore Alley, what does that mean to them? So they have to understand some of this, the basic understanding of the process, and also addressing some of the socio-economic vulnerabilities and low civic awareness, right? If I don't know my rights, I'm not going to be even bothering about you fighting for me, because I don't know what that is. So we really need to have civic education for the victims to understand their rights. And also the socio-economic aspect cannot be neglected or ignored. We find, as in our work that we do, that most of the time when you call victims to participate, you have to give them transport reform. It's not just a nicety, nice to have, it's a necessity for most people. They cannot come to this event because they don't have the fare. They may not have the fare. Number two, even if they had the fare, they don't have the pass for tomorrow. So you're calling them to come, and they're sacrificing their tomorrow. So really, they have to be strengthened socio-economically. And also, like I mentioned, this is a very traumatizing process. We cannot overemphasize providing the psychosocial support for the coping mechanisms for them to be. Most people, when they go to these events and activities, there's a lot of crying going on. You go home, and there's nothing for you, right? There's no center you can go to. There's no service provider that you can go to help you manage these emotions. Protection for the victims from being re-traumatized, having sensitive people that are working with them through the process, people that are interviewing them, taking their statements, they need to be sensitive. If a victim is crying, you cannot just say, stop crying, it's okay. It is not okay. And you cannot just tell them to stop crying. Or like you said, just forget, don't think about it. People need to know how to deal with the victims to help protect them. And the witnesses also, we're going to have witnesses, and there might be retaliation. So witnesses need to be protected for them to come forward. One of the challenges that, that will come up in prosecutions is, investigation and getting witnesses and trying to get a conviction. Because witnesses, if they're afraid to come forward, they will not come, and the case, we lose it. So we need to protect the victims. And we're democratic, so we should not lose sight of the fact that we are a democracy, and it's a country for rule of law. We also need to protect the perpetrators and their rights. They have rights too. So we need to make sure that as we are building our country as a democratic country with rule of law, we need to make sure that no matter what you do, due process takes place, no matter what you do. And, taking everybody on board, I mentioned this yesterday, is that, we all have to move on. It shouldn't be left just to the victims to fight their case. We are all victims, whether we know it or not. The current victims are victims now, but we can also be potential victims. Who knew this would happen to us? We would have never thought. So we really need to make sure that the whole country is along. Public consultations, also basic understanding of the process, keeping the public informed. And then the last part I want to re-emphasize is just the, re-emphasize because it's already been said, is being intentional and deliberate about using this process to build, to expand, to capacitize, to enhance our people, our systems, our processes, and our laws to ensure that peace is sustainable and development is sustainable. We have an opportunity here. Yesterday, we were talking about it, and then I think it was Mrs. Bensouda who was saying at the expert meeting that the need for us to learn and for our laws and for our legal judiciary to learn and be capacitized in this process. It is not just the judiciary that we can do this for, it's the entire process, the entire system, the entire people. And to end, I just want to say something that has already been said, says all the time, without justice there cannot be peace. Without peace there cannot be sustainable development. Accountability is inevitable. Accountability is not negotiable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll second that thought. Thank you. In talking about the judiciary was invited, and I'm happy to note the master of the High Court is here, representing the judiciary, along with one of the legal researchers. I think, in fact, this is not even just any researcher, a legal researcher to the Chief Justice of the Gambia. That's Mr. Tavali, I think, Sadro and Ms. Kumaju. Yeah, so the judiciary is here. They're like a choir, but it's important to note, of course, that they're very much here. And so now we move on to our last session before we do the question and answer. That is on the Gambia and implementation of the KRRC recommendations. And our presenter is the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, Mr.
Thank you very much. Everybody, I stand by existing protocol. I think now this is what we all say. But I think special, thank you, welcome to victims who are here. And also faces that I've not seen in the flesh for many years, apart from virtual, like Fatou, Article 19. Reed, I see you most of the time virtually, Mr. Rapp, and others. So, Honorable, you're most welcome. And then, Senior Counsel, Meme, the Vice Chairperson of the Country Parababanja Commission. So, thank you very much. Quickly, perhaps, again, I must commend the organizers of this conference. This is really timely. And looking at post-TRRC, accountability mechanisms, the framework for prosecution, and looking at the possible best models. But perhaps, maybe I should make it clear, I think I'm listed. I am not speaking on behalf of the executive, although I'm a state institution, independent, but it's from the perspective of the National Human Rights Commission. I just saw, oh yes, okay. No, I just saw that the government and so. But anyway, I should perhaps quickly talk about the best way I would want to address this is to look at the challenges, the opportunities for impactful engagement in order to secure victims, justice for the victims. Quickly, thank you, Gay, for trying to position the National Human Rights Commission already in this whole process. But we were established after the TRRC was actually operational. But Section 12 of our establishment gives us the mandate to promote and protect human rights in the Gambia, fight impunity, and bring back a culture of rule of law into this country. That naturally fits us in this whole process. Of course, there is an exclusion jurisdiction which says that we could not investigate matters that took place before our act was established, unless, of course, the violation is of a continuing nature, things like enforced disappearance, for example. But to start with, when these recommendations we are hoping that the recommendations will be, the report will be out very soon. It will be out, and then what next? The TRRC will phase out. So part of our mandate is to assist the government in formulating appropriate policies to guarantee human rights. In 2019, when the Gambia was reviewed under the Universal Periodic Review in Geneva, this question, you are right, was asked to the government delegation led by then Abubakar Tambi, the Minister of Justice. What happens after the TRRC phases out? Who will follow up with the implementation of the recommendations? And he said at the time that we now have a National Human Rights Commission which is operational, and it will be their task to do so. But not only that, in our strategic plan, which we have just concluded and validated, 2021 to 2025, the TRRC is in two of our strategic objectives, strategic objective 1 and 5. It speaks to the National Human Rights Commission playing a pivotal role in monitoring the implementation of the TRRC. I am hoping, and I think I can say it with a degree of confidence, that the TRRC report, when it's out, will further position the National Human Rights Commission in the center of monitoring its implementation. This is just quickly by way of introduction, so that, because I keep on being everywhere and people say, Mr. Human Rights, why are you into everything? Because my mandate is so broad, and I'm mandated to take part in all these things. Whenever you mention human rights, the law says that I should be there. So that is why perhaps I'm here. It's just by way of introduction. But quickly, really, I think the good thing about speaking last also is that you hear what everybody says, you can plagiarize, you can copy and make it your own. But I will not also overflog. Some of the same issues that have been mentioned, I would have loved to mention, but I'll just mention them in passing. But I think that what is very important in this whole thing, this is very key as we move, and that's why I like this kind of conference, is that we are not just waiting until the report is handed over, and then within 30 days, it comes out and we're running helter-skelter to see what we want to do. We will not be caught like we were perhaps with the CRC, where we all really hoped it was going to go through a particular process and it just died a natural death. So, well, not a natural death, but it was killed in Parliament, in the National Assembly. But anyway, what we are all doing here, including, I will talk about the strategies that we have started employing to make sure that the TRRC report will not just be an other commission report and gather dust. I think we are all mindful of that. We had Mrs. Bensouda yesterday talked about the Jane Commission. Parts of it were implemented, other parts are not. But then again, who is following to make sure that those recommendations are implemented? We had other commissions. Part of the Farabavanta Commission recommendations are implemented. Some are not. But then again, we do not have in those commissions, we do not have a dedicated institution that was there pushing the government. And I think we need to be, this is all part of managing expectations so that we will know what is likely to happen. Again, this is a commission. The government, we cannot just go and force them to, because it's not legislation. It's a commission. And of course, as you know, after 1 month, the government has within 6 months to come up with a white paper to tell us how they're going to implement this recommendation. So we have to understand what these processes are. And this is why it's important, rather than just waiting and allowing the government to shelve it, so that we can have our interventions. So this is what we have. But to start with, I love all those clips, and I think it should be made available to everybody. Because what is important in this whole process is to keep the TRRC alive. I think this is very crucial. we tend to have I think it's probably a national amnesia. We quickly forget and move on to other things. But that's not only the danger. What we have realized, even before the report is out, is that the narrative is changing as to what the TRRC is all about. Sometimes you think this is something that has been brought by Reed Brody. But the TRRC was set up by an act of the National Assembly. It belongs to us. Sorry, Reed, I was just looking at you. I have to mention your name. So it's amazing when you hear, seemingly sometimes, it looks as if the executive is trying to distance themselves from a process that was set up by them through the National Assembly. And this is key, and we need to echo this as well. We need to be echoing this. This is an act of the National Assembly. And it was set up, why? To create an impartial historical record of violations and abuses of human rights from July 1994 to January 2017, promote healing and reconciliation, response to the needs of the victims, address impunity, prosecution for those who bear the greatest responsibility, prevent a repetition of violations and abuses suffered by making recommendation for the establishment of appropriate preventive mechanisms, including institutional and legal reforms, establish and make known the fate and whereabouts of disappeared victims, and provide victims an opportunity to relate their own accounts of the violation and abuses suffered. So this is what was set up, and this is the terms of reference of the TRRC. So if you hear the narrative being changed into reconciliation only, if you hear the narrative being changed to revenge, I have not seen anything revenge. Addressing impunity is not revenge. But again, the narrative has been changed. If you listen, forgiveness, we heard Isa told, why are you following forgive? After all, we're such a religious society. We are very great in that. Whilst all this thing was happening, I didn't make it up. You looked at the TRRC. We were praying fervently 5 days and going to the five times a day in the mosque and going to the church. Yet we were doing the same things. And quickly, we rally around again and say, let's forgive, because this is. But we're talking about impunity. And we have victims. We have victims, and the never again will be made rubbish completely if we do not address issues of impunity, those who bear the greatest burden. And so it is not just about revenge. So we have to, civil society, National Human Rights Commission, everybody, we have to make sure that we remind. I think the president of the Bar Association said, nobody should come and remind us. Yes, true, but we should remind ourselves. I think this is very important. We have to sustain the momentum. And yes, political will is important. It's not only in the Gambia, we have had examples of what happened in Liberia and other places. Politicians have their own agendas. Quickly, if it doesn't suit them, they push it aside. But the political will, it's important. What if they don't have the political will? And that is why I've started coining a new phrase, political demand. And that will come from us to make sure that it's on the agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm saying this because we can have the best system for prosecution. But if, for example, it's not seen as if we are demanding it, it can easily be shoved aside. Yes, there will be the political pressure, international pressure, but it must be seen that Gambians understand what the TRRC was meant for, and popularizing the recommendations of the TRRC. In conclusion, I'll talk about the quick strategies that we have started looking at as a National Human Rights Commission, which will incorporate all the stakeholders. But we need to popularize it. People must actually understand. These videos must be out again for people to understand why the TRRC was set up in the first place. And also, what are these recommendations? Everybody should know, listening to the radio station, and why we should guard against impunity. Because if we talk about never again, we forgot 22 years. This place was, if you lived through that period, you could feel what it meant. you could have been picked up after these meetings, among other things. You know, those, as I always keep on saying, what we said during that period of the coalition of human rights defenders has been corroborated. It was then, no, in Gambia, you are fighting a government. No, we were not fighting a government. We were fighting human rights violation. And it has been there. But quickly, it was mentioned also by Fatou in her speech when she mentioned closing ranks. And that's possible, again, because we have known through the process that there has been no proper security sector reform, civil service reform. The same perpetrators or enablers are sometimes, again, in the same system. And of course, it will not, it's only natural for them, for the system to be described as tissue paper. Haven't we heard that being said? You have an institution set up by the government. All these things came out. We didn't make it up. Yeah, you know, people have explained how people were killed, how they were made to be disappeared. And a segment of a society had the audacity of coming out to say that the recommendations that will come out is as good as tissue paper. But I'm just saying that this is something that we should know, that they're already on the ground. The red flags are there to make sure that the recommendations of the TRC will come to naught. So I think it's important that, these things come out. And just to add, you remember in the Gambia, the period when when a lot of Gambians were fighting against human rights abuses. What was the narrative of human rights? The head of state took it by himself and said that these are Eurocentric ideas. These are only LGBT issues. You know, whilst the fundamental rights and freedoms of Gambians were abused. Whilst the narrative was, and actually, unfortunately, people do buy into these things. So we should get ready to know that for the proper recommendations, for the implementations of the recommendation, we have to, the awareness raising must be there, the agenda should be there. So quickly, perhaps I should talk about, we know 6 months is a long period, which will allow, I have a few minutes. Yeah, but we cannot just wait for the 6 months. We have to influence the process. That's why I've mentioned that if, for example, our institution is mandated to assist the government in formulating appropriate policies and laws to guarantee human rights, this is the time, together with CSOs, I will tell you what strategy we think about, but let us influence what that white paper will even say, so that the government will be mindful for not just deciding to pick one, two, cherry picking, as was said by the president of the Bar of Liberia. We should position ourselves so that we can even have maybe a shadow white paper for them to start with, to assist them in the process. I've talked about lack of political will. We will demand it. The way you will put it, as it was said, maybe for the presidential election, before the report comes out, we would have done and dusted the election. But remember, there is also the parliamentary election. And the standing committee, who the National Human Rights Commission of the National Assembly, we report to them. Not only do we report to them, we update them, should be pivotal in this whole process. They play a very important part if laws are going to be made for prosecution. But not only that, every year I need to go to Parliament to update them on the status of human rights in this country. We will also use those statutory that we do to put the TRRC agenda on the table. What if the government decides in their white paper to ignore most of the recommendations? This is what I say. We should make sure that they will not do that. And we can do that. There are ways of doing this. What if the government says that they want to implement the recommendation, but they do not have the financial resources and human resources? But I think when it comes to prosecution, I think development partners are already ready to assist in that domain. So as soon as a copy of the report is available, I think efforts must be made to disseminate it.
Hello?
To disseminate it widely. That's not coming from me. I don't know where it's coming from. And its content must be made in the local languages so that people can understand what these recommendations are. This will give us, and we need to sustain it. We have a key ally. Yeah, in 3 minutes, I'll finish. We have a key ally, and it has been mentioned by different speakers, and that's even ECOWAS. We talk, it's not six, it sounds sometimes as if only six ECOWAS victims. I think we're referring to the countries. Yes, but the Ghanaians were over 44. Then we had, and in 2019, I was invited by the Bring Jammeh to Justice in Ghana with the National Human Rights Commission of Ghana. So there is a lot of collaborative effort that can be made by those ECOWAS countries, their governments, and also their national human rights institutions and the CSOs who are in those countries. We need to explore that. So a multi-pronged approach, therefore, should be adopted if we are going to obtain success in order to secure justice for the victims. And this involves a concrete, coordinated and collaborated effort between various stakeholders. The National Human Rights Commission, Institute for Human Rights, ANECET, CSOs, Tango, with the support of the UN, EU, ECOWAS, AU, you name them. So what should be done and what we are planning should be done quickly, because I understand, and I'm sure you also probably must have heard, we all hear things, that the report is finally finished and is waiting now to be handed over, or to be received. So when it's received, I think one of the quick and key things to do is to hold a stakeholders consultative conference on the TRRC. We need to bring the stakeholders together. We start thinking of the way forward. That is very key. And during that period, even if we do not have that first week or two access to the documents, let people begin to understand what was the mandate of the TRRC. Why? That this is not tissue paper. This is to fight impunity, among other things. Also, once the report is out, we should disseminate it widely and popularize it. This is extremely important. Let people know. Let the video films come out again. Let us tell people this is what happened in 22 years. There are victims. There are people who have been disappeared. There are people who have been raped. There are people who have been the subject of witch hunting. Many things, very bad things happen in this country. We have to keep the momentum going. And therefore, in so doing, we must. And here I'm talking about at least the plans of the NHRC, and in whatever we do, we're thinking of establishing a national monitoring committee of the TRRC for the implementation of the recommendations. And in this, we may be the driving force, but it will encompass stakeholders in a committee, a monitoring committee, but also to develop a comprehensive monitoring framework to track implementation of the TRRC and to establish a platform to oversee its implementation. These things are important. If we do not do it, and knowing our society, we've seen it, things will just quickly phase out, and perhaps that will, if there is no political will, that will be the preferred choice of maybe the politicians, whoever is there at the time. We need to manage expectations. Sira has said it. These things take time. So we must also manage expectation. Let people understand that just when the report comes out, that doesn't mean that all the problems are solved. Actually, the work begins. So that is important. I know Mr. So has looked at me 2 or 3 occasions. In conclusion, I'll just conclude that it will not be an easy road, but we have to be prepared. We have to be focused. And let us know something, that our main objective, whether it's prosecution, reparation, legal reform, justice for the victims is key to all this. We cannot talk about never again if we condone impunity. It will not be easy. We will have our own different mandates, elbowing each other, CSOs, and our own personal egos. But if we focus on the ball, the big ball, that is justice for the victims, I think we will get there. So with your support, we are all in it together, and I look forward to further consultations to make sure that the TRC recommendation will be implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, as always. We are supposed to have a Q&A. I don't see, I think a lot of people have left. But I wanted to put something out there, particularly we have just journalists in the room to look into. If you look at the Act, I think, I'm not on top of my head, I think it's Section 30. It talks about the government coming up with a white paper within 6 months. What does that mean? Would it mean, like we saw in the Ghana Commission, a white paper to accept, reject, amend, change the recommendations? Or is it a white paper to implement exactly what is recommended, or to implement as recommended by the TRC? I think this is a very, very important question. If you look at Section 30 sub 3, it specifically says white paper within 6 months. And what should the white paper be about? Plan, government's plan to implement the recommendations. So it means if you take the literal meaning of that particular subsection, the government cannot change what is in the recommendations or cannot choose what to, what not to. So it's about coming up with a plan. I think that is something we have to have at the back of our minds, whether we're advocates, whether we're journalists, so that if, when the report is presented, at the end of the day, the white paper comes up with a plan that does not reflect the, recommendations, then we can raise up our hands and say, your white paper violates the very act it was set up under. So I think it's important to have that at the back of our minds, so that really we wouldn't settle for less. If 10 is recommended, we cannot settle for 9.5 or 8. We have to go for all 10. What is expected is a plan of action from the government. So I'll invite all of us to, if you haven't read that part, to please look at it quite properly, particularly the journalists, because it's our responsibility to start asking questions. And I think there is no question more important than that, as in what would the white paper
love like fire. Wow. Love like fire. Xam ngeen rek affaire bi xam ngeen fan la? Skincare la. 2020 lañ wax de. Wow. Fii nag mooy Kerr fan, Kerr zero tache. Perfect skin. Skincare saa su ne rek niñ ko dee defee rek loo lañ soxlaati rek maanaam bu dee am problème ci seen skin yéen xam ngeen fan la fii ngeen di ñëw suma xarit yeeg am di jàmm yi nga xam ne taas daf lañ sonaloon xam nga doon xeesal ba la ka xum éneew ma lañ ko nag waaye just in case comme ni ko gars yi di waxee rek en cas just in case loolu xew xam ngeen fi ngeen di ñëw fii ngeen di ñëw Skincare Plus si yu baax rek la ñoo dox nag ay baax rek fu ne la ñoo dem ci réew mi di lañ indi rek nag products yu baax du Paris du Italie du USA du fi mu nekk nii sax boole nañ ci nag Sweden fu nekk lañ leen a indilee products bu dee tamit nag da nga ñuul rek ñu lay jamaa natural beauty that melanin dripping we do have stuff for you as well emuñ si skincare products rek ñu ngi ci cuub yi tamit fu ne la ñoo jaar in fact sax last commercial bi ñu defoon waxuñ leen woon ne dañoo dox ci ay kawar 9A grade rek nag waaw we do have bundles as well hair si lu ne la ñoo dox ñun ñu ngi ci rafetal jigéen rek luy taaral jigéen rek waaw boo leen di tukki tamit bëggoon rek classic suitcase ñu dañoo dox ci ay Samsonite duñ dee indi any brand of suitcases though other than Samsonite comme li ma dee wax rek boo eggee airport dëri Samsonite dafa am nuñ laa xoolee waaw ngeen ne lan nag waaw skin ci moom la ñu gën a xamee nag skin care products ci moom la ñu gën a xamee ñu ngi dox tamit bentee tamit si ay dàlla man waaye man nag skin care mooy suma specialty xam nga rek jigéen bu sa xar kanam réglé loo def mu jag am nañ Patricia Kiwi Eye, the whole range, Lighten Up Gold, Tomatine. I mean, the list can just go on and on and on and on. Lépp loo xam ne rek luy taaral jigéen la ci yooyu rek la ñoo dox. Skincare plus nag emuñ si Gambia rek ñu ngi United States ñu ngi Gambia fii ba pare bu dee yaa ngi anywhere in Europe mun nañ la ko mail within 3 days rek ñetti fan rek nga jot say diw emuñ si loolu rek dañ laa consult tamit balaa ñu laa jaay diw dinañ def a free consultation pour wax la rek exactly li nga xam ne moo méngoo ak sa kanam dinañ leen wax tamit ne rek am nañ perfumes, fragrances, men's shirts, accessories. We do dresses as well. We do blouses. I mean, we do shoes. Name it, we do them. Skincare Plus 2020 is our year of perfection. Zero task. Fi mu nekk nii réew mi fii kenn waratu fi task kenn waratu fi am problème kanam kenn waratu fi am problème picture boo ko amee dafa fekk ne rek ñëwuloo ci place bi fii.
Love like fire. Bring my yobo guma fire. Love like fire.
Agada.
Mbijan aganyani.
Albaka.
Mbaka important.
Yo, nga transfer la sto.
Ya transfer la sto.
Ha, code nyingi.
Okay. Korsa. Nsila ID soto.
Ah, sa soto. Sorry. Agada.
Mbijan bro.
Albaka.
Mbaka.
Bara alla service o tariaka.
Ah,
mbare. Mo ki janna nun kunu bara tariaka.
Ah, janno mi yona forest de bureau. Gambia tonkon na no mbari ya bere. Ha. Birim koyna fo kato.
Bari si kodo kino kato ni fo bolong blabe to.
56 branches mola soto Gambia jam.
Ha?
Ha. Gambia kono ani Gambia bantala bankol. Nko kodo kiya bere to. Kodo sifa fo falindiro fo nyaadi lafta même na kodi to poto nin kodi maraw. Jannam number 1 di nyonta. Andum fana nata anoda enterprise sotale. Wolam nyindi ko domorol fana kol fana be firale de dadi manin domorol ni fana beteat. Gambia dawda yalo ngam fa kendol sotale je.
Ha wo mo yo diat ha.
Apelenta
baraka ba. Ni lafta nyelen kendol e binaji.
Yalo bu kanyi la ko la baraka ba.
Yalo ndel chosano lo.
Abaraka.
We live in a day and age where technology is creating a world without borders, filled with unlimited potential to improve the lives of the people around us. Innovarex Global Health ushers in a new way of leveling the playing field with increased access to quality healthcare services delivered at your doorstep. Our qualified professionals are equipped with state-of-the-art point-of-care testing technology to conduct tests such as kidney function, liver function, electrolyte tests, body composition, hemoglobin, A1C, and many more services with the highest efficiency in delivering results. The addition to our flagship Wellness on Wheels, more fondly known as WOW Delivery Service, brings the entire clinical experience full circle. IGH has remained committed to creating the future of healthcare delivery. Gone are the days of sending loved ones outside the country for basic medical services. Innovarex Global Health offers a new peace of mind and takes pride in delivering the quality of care we all deserve.